When you're developing a package for a product in a 3D program, you need to get the geometry of that product into the program so you can derive components, whether it be die cut sheets or vacuum forming or other components around that product. Now, some products are very complicated, so you have to interpret the geometry that you need, and some are very simple. So I was going to demonstrate a workflow here and just building the product, and I'm going to use this product to demonstrate several other packages. So this will just be the start of this. This is just a light bulb. Excuse me. So this is a very simple shape. It's just a profile, and then we have to just revolve that. But if you look at this, it is a complicated object when you look more closely at it. It's got all these vents and louvers and little LEDs and clear parts, and it's got the screw thread at the bottom. So it's actually quite complicated. But for the packages that I'm creating, all I really need is the profile, which is basically just the outline of this shape, and then we can revolve that, and I can use that geometry. So it really depends on what kind of product you have. So this will be a little bit of a workflow to do that. So I found a picture of the light bulb. This picture was taken professionally, so it is a perfect orthographic view. Now I say perfect orthographic, it's done professionally, so there's no distortion, there's no keystoning or any kind of parallax or perspective. No, it's a really nice flat picture of the light bulb, which is very helpful so we can get a nice accurate geometry from it. So I have the actual light bulb, and I can measure from that, and I can actually build it myself. But if you can find a perfect flat picture or pictures that you need that you can trace, it's extremely helpful. So let's start with that. I have this light bulb. So if you go up to where I have my materials here, where all the cubes are at the top, if we click on click on one of those, I already have this set up. So I was going to show the process that I went through to do this. So under the top here, they have, if you go to under color, that's where we just bring in our basic color, and we can do all these kind of textures here. At the very, very bottom, they have one called color map. If you click on that, we can bring in, they call them textures, and I'll explain to you what that means in a moment. If you click on color map and you go to options, this dialog box will come up, and then you can go to load, and you can bring in a JPEG picture or any other kind of picture that you've set up. So I had found this one of the bulb right here, so I just labeled it. I knew that's the one I wanted to use. If you double click on that and you open that, cancel, that will come in here and it'll label it. And there's some things you can do to modify that. So in this particular station, you don't have to worry about that. It's just going to be a picture that we're going to trace, and I'm going to use that. Actually, I'm going to texture map that onto our three-dimensional object for rendering purposes. So once that's in, we can just say okay. And then we have that picture in here. And again, we can do things to it. I just have it on under reflection. I have it on constant, which means it's not going to be affected by any kind of lighting. So it'll just be like a perfectly clear picture, because all I want to do right now is trace that. But we can talk about a lot of those other options later on. So that's what's actually on this picture right here in the middle. I brought that bulb in, but I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. So if you go to, let's go to the view, and we go to front. So now this is perfectly flat, and we're going to come over to this outline here. I'm just going to demonstrate what I have there set up in the center. So all this is a two-dimensional rectilinear surface. It's not 3D, it's just a flat panel. And I'm just guessing about how big it is because I measured my bowl. But I'm going to bring in the texture map, and then I want to make that texture map exactly the size of the bulb so I can trace that. So this is the process to do that. Once you have this flat piece here, and you can't, I'm going to click on wireframe. So wireframe right here does not show any imagery. So we have these three circles at the top. We need to go to either one of these other two. This is interactive shaded, and then we also have like kind of like another rendering program here, which is a little bit more finite. Both of them work, but when I do this tracing thing, I'll do interactive shaded, which is this middle sphere here. And then I also have that set up. If you right click on that, there are the shaded work options. And in here, when I'm doing this, I like to put points on. We can turn the points on and off. That shows me where there are where our segments touch one another. Make sure there's no overlapping. So it's really important to have that. I think it's important to have that on when going through this process. So if we take this picture, and if you just click on it, you can see I'm bringing that little picture down here, and now this is illuminated. I'm just going to let go, and it has now put that picture on that flat surface. But it looks quite distorted. So we need to get this into the right situations. This is a little finicky. So if you come down here under my little ghost icon, and in this area of attributes, there's something called edit texture. It's like this little brick cube with an arrow on it. So if you click on that tool, and then you click on this object, this dialog area over on the right-hand side will come up. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here. There's a couple of variables that we can play with. We have the coordinates and rotation, and where this object is. I wouldn't at this point, I would just say edit on face. That's good enough for now. The origin is just giving us the calculations of where that is. It automatically will put it on this surface. So you don't have to worry about that at this point. Rotation is critical. We have X, Y, and Z. This is now looking at X. We're looking at it from the front. And 0 and 0, X and Y, those are flat on. So we're looking straight at. So those are good at this point. If I put X at 0, that means we're looking straight down on it. This is going to take a little bit of getting used to. You can just experiment with these things and I'll give you a feel for what that is. We're going to do flat mapping, so I'm putting it right on the front. And we definitely want to lock the size to the proportions. I don't want to change the proportions of that bulb. I want to lock that. So we have that exactly into the right size. Now, this bulb is only, a few inches wide, and it is now at 48 inches wide, so it's huge. So I'm just going to guess. Let's just bring that down to like 3 inches approximately. And there it is. So a texture map, I'm just going to select the center of the circle down here. Texture map means that it repeats the image over and over again. So you see, as I move this around, that image is being repeated over and over again. All I want is one of those images in the center, because this texture map tool is used to repeat images. Like if you had a brick wall or something and had a pattern of some bricks, it will automatically texture that image over and over and over again. So you get this continuous brick wall effect. We don't want that. We just want one picture of the light bulb at the correct size. So you can see I'm selecting the bottom of this picture with this little circle area, and I'm moving it around. So what we're going to do here, I'm not going to go through this, but you have to measure the width and the height, or any part of your actual you need to know, let's say the max height or the width or the thread pattern or something, so you can get this image to the exact size that you need. So to do that, what you might do is come over here. I have it at 3 inches wide. So let's do 3.5, 3.5 inches wide. I'm going to click on that. It made it bigger. So you have to go back and forth a little bit and get this to the right size on this little panel here, and then center it or get it into position where you want, because you're going to trace this. So it's a little bit of back and forth on doing that. So I have that set up right here to the left. So I'm not going to continue working in this part, but that's how you bring in a texture map on this thing. And like I'm saying, this is just like a photograph, a JPEG image is pasted on this flat little board here in the front. So if we go back to the front view, I'm just going to get rid of this so it doesn't distract. If I go back to one of my white cube here and I press on paint color, I'm going to click on that. So that image now went away because I erased the texture map by just making it a different color. Okay, so now we're looking here in the middle, and this is our light bulb, and we can see that edge. So what we need to do is trace the profile, because this is a perfectly round object. So all I have to do is create this profile, and then I can revolve that to do our image. So if you zoom in, you can start to see our edges. and how they work. It is okay to abbreviate the geometry a little bit, depending on what the detail is and what kind of package you have. All I want to do is trace this and kind of, I don't need every little bump and every little detail here. Some of these radiuses I do want, and I'm going to include them. So I'm just going to interpret this a little bit. So I drew these lines. See if I can grab these. So I have that arc, and I have this straight line. That I drew these 3 straight lines just by tracing this all the way around. And then down here, I had this straight edge here, and then I did this negative curve, and then I did these lines down here in the bottom around the thread pattern. I'm not building the thread pattern. I'm just sort of abbreviating all those little bumps. I don't need that level of detail. I'm sort of simplifying this because I don't need that in my package. If your package picks up on some of these details, then obviously you need to build them or at least know where they are so you can work with them. This one is pretty straightforward. So this is actually a very simple object to do. I just want to go through this process. So once I create all these lines, and I'm comfortable with where they are, I'm going to go back to my wireframe. And now here are these lines. So what we do is I made these separately. I built them and I modified it slightly and moved the points around so I can get this really clean. So what we do is go into our tool, our tool editing area, which is right here. So in here, we have a join right here on the left. So what we can do is we can select, I'm going to select the curve and I'm going to select that next thing, and they should be joined together. And we will see them as I move along. So now when I click on those 2 are joined. And I'm going to do this little one. This one. So these points are telling me that these things are perfectly lined up. I don't want 2 little points close to one another. That's coincident points, and that causes problems in geometry. Okay, so now I'm selecting this whole profile, and it's all one line. It's ready to go. And if you want, you can go back to interactive shader, and I can take a look at that, and I can see how that is following my light bulb perfectly. There are a few radiuses in here that I did not include. I'm going to do them afterwards. There's a subtle little curve right here. I'm going to radius that after I do the revolve. There's a gentle curve right in here, which is quite large. I'm going to do that separately also. And down at the bottom, I think I might leave those. I think I did use some of those. Okay, so that's tracing the product. Let's just turn this into a little bit of a 3D view. So I have that selected. So I'm going to go to my Revolve tool, which is right here. It's the 3rd one down. It's the first one under the Derive 2 category. So I'm going to click on Revolve, and I'm going to do Smooth. I'm not going to work in Faceted. So what I can do is I can take this 2D line structure that I put together, and I'm going to revolve it 180 degrees. I think I've mentioned this before. When I do my revolves, I'd like to do 180 degrees at a time, and then I mirror it around. I like to hang on to those center lines. Those come in handy later on when I'm doing some building and some geometry. So clockwise, I think that's the way I want to do it. So it's 180 degrees. So all we have to do is select this blue line in the middle, which is the center of our world. If I was in a different location, all I would have to do is draw a line with the line tool where I want to revolve. They both work. So I'm going to select that blue line and went around the back. So let's not do that. So that was clockwise. So let's bring it around counter. That would be this way. And now that has come around the front. Let me just see. Okay, that's I'm just going to color this so I'm going to use this gray. So it's illuminated. So I'm going to say I like that. I'm just going to color it this gray so we can see it a little more clearly. Okay, there it is. So that's the revolve. And there's all those details. So as you can see, I have this revolve already over here on this side. So you can see what I did with some of the radiuses. I radiused this little area under here, and I'm going to do that at this point. So we can do this with two-dimensional surfaces. So I'm going to just select that line there. I went under my line tool in my topological level. This is object. I can point. I can select all these parts of the object. I'm just going to select that line. And I don't remember exactly what I did, but let's see if I can. I'm sure it's bigger than that. Let's just do 90 thousandths. See if that's about right. Okay, so I just radiused that little corner. That looks about right. And then it looks like I did some small radiuses down here at the bottom. So I'm going to use this also for a vacuum form pattern, and I'm going to use it for a folding carton and for a corrugated box. So some of the nuances of the product will vary slightly. So that's why I like to keep this information that I might use later. So I radius those two. So I'm not going to go through that at this point, but you can see how that works. The next part of doing this is taking this object. I'm going to select this object. You can do this in 3/4 view. I like looking at the objects when I make these functions. I like seeing it happen. I'm just a little neurotic about that. So I'm going to mirror this around, and the mirror tool is down here under the transform. It's this. There's several kind of mirrors, but I'm going to mirror this one on the axis. I'm going to mirror copy. So I'm essentially selecting anything on the center. So I'm just going to go to this point here and just move that over. And now I have that half mirrored to the other side. So we have the two halves. Now another part of this is Form Z is a solid model and a surface modeler, which a lot of the programs are. See, unlike Shaper, which is not a surface modeler, you can't work this way. So it's a little different of workflow. So let's just ghost my texture map. So here I have those two halves, and it's hollow. You can see right on through to the bottom, and everything's nice. So if I want to make this a solid, this is a big distinction that we're going to have to talk about all the time. When you do surface modeling and solid modeling, those are two different types of entities. These are surfaces right here, and I can do certain things with them. But quite often, I'll need that to be a solid, which means everything has to be closed. Right now, I cannot make that a solid because it's only two surfaces. So I need to draw this or build this circle on the top and build a circle on the bottom, and I need to stitch. When you take surfaces and you put them together, they call it stitching. And once you stitch all the surfaces together, you can then create a solid. I am going to change my reference plane. I have these three axes here. I'm going to do it to this horizontal axis. So now you can see my grid is laying down because I'm going to draw a circle, and I'm going to draw it diameter-wise, which is circle 2. So what I can do is I'm just going to go into wireframe so I can see what I'm doing a little more clearly. I have these 2 points. I'm going to take my circle tool, and I'm going to click on one point. This moves around all of it, but it's on that horizontal plane. And I'm going to bring it over to this side and click. So now I have created a 2-dimensional surface on the top there. Let's go to interactive shader, and you can see I have this part now on the top. That would have to be done on the top and the bottom because I did not include that in my revolve. I actually prefer to do that. I don't want to revolve on center. I want to resolve and then add my closure later. So I'm going to do the same thing down here to make sure I'm on horizontal. I'm going to click on that point, and I'm going to, oh, this is not horizontal, so that's not going to work. Hold on. I think I'm clicking to another plane here, which I should not be doing. So that's why I go into wireframe. It's picking planes for me, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to select my circle, and I'm going to bring that over to this side, and it's snapping. I have my point snaps on. I guess when I'm talking about snapping, all our snapping tools are right over here where I have my cursor. If I do this, this thing turns all my snapping off, and I want the snapping on. I have some choice on which snapping I can do. Usually I have most of these on, but sometimes I'll turn them off because they can get in the way sometimes. So again, interactive shader. So now I have a little floor on here. So let's just go to fit. So if I were to take these two surfaces, that top and that bottom, and then stitch them all together, I would have a solid. Now, solids can come into use depending on what you're doing. So I'm leaving this open at this point because some of these structures, a surface will be okay. And for the vacuum form, I definitely need a solid. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I'm just talking about developing this product to be used in some of these other scenarios. So another thing that's helpful, so this is it. This is ready to go. I can stitch these together and I can use this geometry as a surface or solid to build my packages. Another thing I want to talk about right now is putting that texture map, that photograph that I had. You can map that right onto this geometry, and that's this other light bulb way on the left. So if you look at that from the front, and I'll do a rendering of it, it looks pretty good. But as you can see, as it comes around the corner, it's getting distorted because it's not UV mapped and it's just a flat photograph. It's not designed to be mapped around a dimensional object. It'll get distorted. But quite often, I'll just use this for rendering purposes. I don't want to build that entire light bulb. I don't want to build all those vents and all these little lights. That would be a huge piece of geometry and basically a waste of time. So when I do my rendering, all I need is a pretty picture of the light bulb. But I can do that right here in Form Z by taking that exact photograph that I had used to trace, and I can map that on to a dimensional object. So I'm going to show that right now. So I'm going to take, here's my light bulb, just like when I mapped it on to the two-dimensional surface. I'm going to map this right on this three-dimensional surface. And there, I didn't have to adjust it. I guess I had that all set up. Well, it's pretty good. Again, we could do that in texture map tool, the little brick with the arrow, and I can click on this thing. It'll select the whole thing, and I can control. I still did flat mapping, 90 degrees from the front. So I think I have it scaled already. So the scale was perfect, and I have it proportioned to the size. So it gives me this nice, beautiful view, and that I will use for renderings, which I'm going to show later. So after I build my geometry and build my samples and my prototypes and all that, I might want to go back and create a rendering with a pretty picture of this light bulb in the rendering, and that's what this will give me. So here are these renderings. So you can see, obviously, these little yellow squares, as soon as we get around the corner here, are distorted. It's not very clear. But most of the time, the rendering that I'm going to create for this, I'm just going to go back into interactive shader. I'm just going to rotate this a little bit. Will be a little bit more head on. It might be like straight on or slightly off, or the package will probably cover some of that. So I'm not as worried. There it is. So that's just the photograph mapped onto three-dimensional objects. So that will come in handy in rendering later on. These other packages can be corrugated, folding carton, and a vac form.